More and more states are legalizing medical marijuana, and 2 states, as of now, have legalized the recreational use of marijuana. And so I'm here with Dr. Stephen Ross, who's the head of addiction psychiatry at NYU Tisch Medical Center, and we're also on board at NYU Langone Medical Center as faculty members, so welcome, Steve.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so interested in this. Tell us about this recent study that just came out about what the consequences might be of legalizing it.
So this was a study for some colleagues of mine at NYU, and it took a look at data from what's called the Monitoring the Future study. It's a study conducted at the University of Michigan that's funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and it looks at use patterns of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. And it looked at data from 2007 to 2011 and asked the question of 8th and 10th and 12th graders, if marijuana were legal, would you use it, or would you be more likely to use it? And interestingly, they found that among the group that had never tried marijuana, this sort of low-risk group, 10% said that if it were legal, they would use. And these were the individuals that had low risk factors to ever develop, to ever use marijuana. So in other words, they didn't smoke cigarettes, they were spiritual religious, and their friends disapproved of marijuana. But they said if it were legal, they would try it.
That's interesting. And if you look at the math, as of 2010, about 46% of high school seniors had tried marijuana by the time they graduate. So if you add 10% to that, it goes up to about 51% or so. And I was looking at those graphs that you're mentioning, and it's really interesting to me because the use of marijuana among adolescents, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders, went down, down, down for 10 years. Then around 2006, 2007, it started going up, up, up. And I started looking what happened in 2006, 2007, and medical marijuana started becoming more and more popular, and now it's legal in 20 states in the District of Columbia, and many more undoubtedly are going to come on board. Has there been some sort of a halo effect where people sort of are more accepting of medical marijuana and they sort of push that onto recreational use?
It looks like that may be happening. We know that in high school students, perception of harm is very much correlated with use. So if high school students think something is harmful, they're much less likely to use it, and the converse is the case. So there was a big decline of marijuana use in 8th, 10th, and 12th graders for many years, as you mentioned, but the last couple of years, the perception of harm of marijuana is going down and the use is starting to go up. And people think and attribute it may be due to the medical marijuana movement and how quickly it's moving. And now with legalization of marijuana in 2 states, there is this effect that people are coming to perceive this as a less harmful compound, and that may have effects on more people using and perhaps more people getting addicted.
And you had told me earlier that about 10% of people who ever try marijuana get addicted to it, which is a surprising number to me. And what was the number for alcohol and tobacco?
Well, the most addictive drug is tobacco. 1 out of 3 get addicted. Alcohol, about 15% get addicted, and with cannabis, about 1 out of 10 that try it develop addiction in terms of the ways that we measure it.
Now, people are concerned because especially the adolescent brain, which is still developing until 25, 30, that it might be especially susceptible to the effects of marijuana. And there was a recent study out of Northwestern that looked at possible MRI changes and structural and functional changes in the brain that for all we know, are permanent or at least long-lasting. What is the research about that?
Well, the adolescent brain is developing, and it's a time that you really don't want to disturb its development, and drugs of abuse can certainly do that. There is evidence to suggest that marijuana use, in particular heavy marijuana use during the adolescent period, can lead to lower IQ scores compared to people that didn't smoke it later. And that doesn't prove that marijuana diminishes IQ, and the functional equivalent of that is not yet known, but it's certainly concerning that adolescents who might think that it's less harmful, that might start smoking, may ultimately affect their brain function and their intellectual function in the future.
To me, a big issue is what happens when you stop. So the study from Northwestern was concerning because the people in that study had stopped, and yet you saw the changes in their brain months later. What is the thinking about you stop smoking and then 5 years later, 10 years later? Do we have any sense of what the long-term effects are?
There's no evidence that long-term use of marijuana causes irreversible brain damage or functional impairment after you stop smoking it, as opposed to alcohol, which we know certainly does. So you can see brain changes in MRI studies, but none of that. I mean, the brain changes if you give it any drug. So we don't really know. We need more research to understand how harmful marijuana is, let's say cognitively, into the future if somebody stops, but we just don't know at this point.
Dr. Stephen Ross, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.